Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. We are back again with another 30 days of thought. Today I'm on page 93 and 94. The purpose is to read, to think, write, to develop, listen to hear what's unsaid, and speak to let go. Make sure you keep filming your videos. Today, No Evil is the title of this excerpt. And coincidentally, I was reading 12 Rules for Life because I'm doing our lecture series on each rule. Look out podcast, and I was reading as we were driving to. I was not driving. I was able to read as we were driving to the office, and coincidentally, on page 227 and 228, or 226, 227, and 228 of the 12 rules for life, which I believe is Rule 8. Tell the truth or at least don't lie. Yeah, which is Rule 8. Tell the truth or at least don't lie. There are stark commonalities. It's an interesting coincidence between the excerpt that I'm on today for 30 Days of Thought and a passage here. So I'm going to read that. I hope you're following along by reading 30 Days of Thought and writing your thoughts and filming your videos, because the value that comes from that is not only clearer thinking and an awareness of if you even have an opinion or not, and the challenge of having to face the crowd and be judged before the crowd, and the ability to work on your speaking, and the ability to look back years from now and see who you were then and what you thought then and where you were at then in your self-development versus in the future when you look back on that in that current present. But having gone through this multiple times, I tell you, I'm a different person every time. And what what we're doing together here is actually the work, the repetition, the iteration of self-development. We are doing it together. And some of this has to do with this excerpt today. So I want to read this. It's called No Evil. But before I do that, here's an excerpt from 12 Rules, Rule 8, on page 227. Life is suffering. The Buddha stated that explicitly. Christians portray the same sentiment imagistically with the divine crucifix. The Jewish faith is saturated with its remembrance. The equivalence of life and limitation is the primary and unavoidable fact of existence. The vulnerability of our being renders us susceptible to the pains of social judgment and contempt and the inevitable breakdown of our bodies. But even all those ways of suffering, terrible as they are not sufficient to corrupt the world, to transform it into hell, the way the Nazis and the Maoists and the Stalinists corrupted the world and turned it into hell. For that, as Hitler stated so clearly, you need the lie. So here's an excerpt that was stated by that liar. Quote, in the big lie, there is always a certain force of credibility, because the broad masses of a nation are always more easily corrupted in the deeper strata of their emotional nature than consciously or voluntarily. And thus, in the primitive simplicity of their minds, they more readily fall victims to the big lie than the small lie, since they themselves often tell small lies in little matters, but would be ashamed to resort to large-scale falsehoods. It would never come into their heads to fabricate colossal untruths, and they would not believe that others could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously. Even though the facts which prove this to be so may be brought clearly to their minds, they will still doubt and waver and will continue to think that there may be some other explanation. End quote. Here's Peterson now talking. For the big lie, you first need the little lie. The little lie is, metaphorically speaking, the bait used by the father of lies to hook its victims. So when that excerpt that I was reading, the quote, that was from this tyrant, this liar, this proselytizer of resentment, Hitler himself, when he's talking about if the institution, if the state says a big enough lie, part of what makes that, what influences people to believe it, are how people live on a microscopic level, how each individual may lie to themselves, may well, naturally lies himself, but tells white lies, what we call white lies, or little lies, that all of us can easily be susceptible to. And in a statistical sense, in a mass sense, in a mass population sense, you get a mass population together, the likelihood that most of you listening, us people, we tell little lies. And the more little lies we tell, the more susceptible we are psychologically to buy into the big lies. That's what Peterson's making that argument. I wrote this note down. For an institution, a big lie is equivalent to an individual's little lie. That there's a whole, we could go and down that rabbit hole now. Institutions become corrupt. They corrupt themselves. Maybe proportional to your or my little lie that we might tell in an awkward situation, or so we want to get out of something. We don't want to embrace the conflict, shame somebody, hurt somebody's feelings, and might lie to them. That ends up in the short term helping us, but in the long term, Peterson's making this point that it's those types of lies, it's that type of way of living that make one susceptible to harsher lies and harsher environments and harsher consequences of their life. What does that have to do with the excerpt today? Well, it's interesting because the excerpt today is no evil. And here it is. The mirror is clear, for it tells only truth. It is hard to hide one's secrets when facing them head on. As one contemplates life's virtues, one has no other choice but to look inward, as any other focal point shows only hollow ground to lay foundations of perspective. One's knees grow weak up to adherence of a counter to former logic. All misinterpretations, qualms, and unsettled thoughts result in nonconformity of self. When we do not allow our inner nature to take the lead, the perpetual sounding board plays violently within and opens the bottomless pit of self-gratification, hedonism, desire, dissonance, and evil. And I want to highlight that one. The evil we take for granted in the men and women who cover or covet our prisons and labor camps, our corporate space. That evil is the demon of primal being. Pure evil is not pure. It is but an articulation of the essence of starved, cold, and hunter-like predators that lurk in our amygdala. We all share this devil. It is us, and it becomes us when we think we are in control. This is our finest moment of self-intoxication. Contrary for us to know ourselves, we must know evil. How do we take heed of such things of imperfections, of such signs of imperfection? How do we take heed of such signs of imperfections? We must start by looking in the mirror. To see through the titles placed upon our crest, we must recognize our fate and impose on our dark thoughts. We must allow our silent keepers to know who we are. We must know evil face to face as he lives in the reflection staring back. We must admit the truths, or we will know evil more than we know him today. Without recognition, we are damned to become him perpetually. This is a call to action, to look in the mirror, to take responsibility, to recognize. And so I highlighted this one piece. I want anyone listening to this, go to a podcast I was on recently in 2024, episode 703 of Dropping Bombs. It's a conversation about control. It's a conversation about control. I believe that conversation, outside of just the substance itself, the content itself, the dialogue, or the content, the conversation, what was talked about, the how the conversation takes place, how my counterpart relates to me, how I relate to them, We are, it's a symphony expressing the very idea revealed in this excerpt, no evil, and exemplified between page 226 and 228 in 12 Rules for Life, Rule 8. Tell the truth or at least don't lie. We're in a disagreement around control, whether we are in control or not in control. And you can listen to the debate, to the dialogue on episode 703 of Dropping Bombs. It's a real, true, beautiful episode, conversation, and example of what I'm attempting to make. And watch it on YouTube. Watch how I relate to my counterpart, how my counterpart relates to me, and let our friendship and our relationship reveal what's I'm attempting to make a point of. So, in closing, what I highlighted earlier in page 93 of 30 Days of Thought, I'm rereading and filming videos. When we do not allow our inner nature to take the lead, the perpetual sounding board plays violently within and opens the bottomless pit of self-gratification, hedonism, desire, dissonance. When we don't step into who we actually are, part of that is being honest with ourselves. Part of that is having the courage to do so. Part of that is having the courage to speak. That has a relationship with how courageous we will be in circumstances that are out of our control. Like, for example, you know, uh, uh, um, it's a hostile. Like, think of the people, think of the heroes that we all, we watch in movies who show up at the time when, it's like somebody needs help and 100 people are just staring at the crowd, and then somebody runs in and saves the person. What if there's a relationship with that act of courage and how that person had lived their life up to that moment, up to that point? And Peterson's making an argument that that's the case. It's through all of his literature, the 12 Rules, Beyond Order, Maps of Meaning, so on. I'm saying in No Evil that um, it's a part of our nature. Our natural state is to be reactive, to perpetuate evil, what we could easily consider evil, what we consider evil is really the long-term result of acts that we would consider irrelevant or we'd be apathetic to. Like, for example, the little lies that Hitler was talking about anchor down the populace to be manipulated by the big lie. The bigger lie that you tell, the more likely the average person will believe it, because although they would never do a gigantic lie, they lie so much throughout their life that they couldn't imagine that the big lie would be untrue. So you're leveraging the same rationality, the same self-rationality, the same self-deceit that the average person uses every day to lie to themselves. To continue lying to other people, to avoid conflict, to avoid reason, to avoid being strained and stressed and tested in their value system self-justifyingly. That same self-justification muscle that the average person is working out every single day, the totalitarian state is taking advantage of by lying so explicitly, so intentionally, so infamously, so big. The average liar will just buy right into it and justify in their mind, every rationale that would be available to them through their intellect and through their reason, their knowledge, so that they wouldn't have to look at themselves and admit themselves that, because they'd have to face themselves and be a pure person themselves to see through the lie. And ultimately, like, let's not be those people. Let's fight that impulse. I say here, pure evil is not pure, it's but an articulation of the essence of starved, cold, and hunter-like predators that lurk in the amygdala. There's a part of our nature we're fighting our nature, we're fighting our brain, the lack of resources, the lack of relationships that might lead us to go the path of least resistance. And God help us, we need to get out of that reactive, infantile or hunter-like predator state to become leaders, to become courageous individuals. Um, We all share this devil. It is us, and it becomes us, and we think we are in control. That is a psychologism. We are not in control, but we are responsible. We have the ability to respond on a spectrum of awareness. We are not in control of everything. And most of what occurs is not within our control. But we are responsible for how we relate to what goes on in our lives, and we can do things that lower the likelihood of us losing and increase the likelihood of succeeding. But within, it's not black and white, like we are in control or we are not in control. It's somewhere in between. And even the willingness to doubt control is the beginning of awareness and thought and thoughtfulness. And because what ends up occurring is those that believe they're in control, they just end up controlling other people because their desire, their psychological need to be in control is so deep. The roots to hell have the roots to hell have grown so deep in their soul, in their body, in their in their psychology, in their culture. They have to control everyone around them. And the great denial that everyone around them is being controlled leads to hell on earth, whether that's a totalitarian regime or whether that's a company culture where nobody could say what they think and share how they feel and think what their own thoughts. They're just thinking the thoughts of the cult of personality leader. And that stifles innovation. It stifles meaning. It stifles everything. It destroys humanness and undermines creativity and undermines ultimately the organization, the shareholders. So, like, I have a very practical sense, self-awareness, discipline, courage, integrity, consistency, honesty, to sow the seeds of an open society and an open culture. And for us to act that out, me, you, whoever, knowing evil is a part of that, knowing what we're capable of and or remembering what we've done and admitting that and working through that will prime us for the ability to burden the responsibilities that come with authority, influence, and power. This is another 30 days of thought. Challenge you to go take a look at Rule 8 in 12 Rules for Life, page 226 to 228. Listen to Dropping Bombs, episode 703, for an example of what I'm talking about today. Watch how we relate to one another and debate over this idea of control. And I think you'll learn so much from that dialogue by watching it on YouTube and actually watching the interaction and listening to the content of what is said, but also watching how it takes place. I think is a beautiful symphony of the we're talking about today. Pick up 30 Days of Thought, and we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast.